Lauren sobbed, gripping my hands tightly, her blue eyes filled with desperation. "Please, let's fix this," she whispered, her voice trembling. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, already calculating how to manipulate me back into her life, how to make this all disappear with a well-placed apology and a few tears. She still thought she had control. I nodded, my face calm, unreadable. She took it as a sign of hope. That was her first mistake. The next day she came home expecting a fresh start. I had made sure of that. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I let her believe exactly what she wanted to believe, that I was weak enough to let her back in. As soon as she stepped through the door, her smile faltered. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning the half-packed boxes, the clothes missing from the closet, the undeniable signs that she had misunderstood everything. I stood there, suitcase in hand, perfectly composed. "I agree," I said simply, stepping aside. And there, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, was Olivia, Lauren's best friend. Lauren's face crumbled, her confidence shattering in an instant. The same smug assurance she had worn when she thought she could cheat and still keep everything vanished. She blinked, as if she couldn't trust what she was seeing, as if her mind was refusing to accept it. Olivia, stunning as ever, leaned casually against the doorframe, her lips curling into a slow, knowing smile. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't ashamed. And that was the worst part for Lauren. Olivia wasn't a mistake. She wasn't a rebound. She was the proof that Lauren had lost. Lauren's voice barely came out, her hands trembled. "You're joking, right?" I tilted my head slightly, considering her, enjoying the way her entire world was folding in on itself. "I already moved on," I said, my voice as even as ever. Lauren's breathing grew unsteady. "But you said—" "I never said I forgave you," I interrupted. "I just let you think what you wanted to think." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to argue, to beg, to demand an explanation. But she knew. She knew there was nothing she could say to undo this. I watched as she struggled to process the reality, to make sense of how she had gone from feeling in control to standing in the ruins of her own arrogance. Silence stretched between us. She was searching for something to hold on to, some angle to regain power, but for the first time, she had nothing. "Close the door on your way out," I said, turning back to Olivia. And just like that, Lauren was left standing in the mess she created. Lauren stood frozen in place, her body stiff, her breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob. She wasn't just looking at Olivia. She was looking at the undeniable proof of her failure. She had walked in expecting a reconciliation, a clean slate, another chance to talk her way back into my arms. Instead, she was witnessing her worst nightmare unfold in real time. Her eyes darted from me to Olivia and back again, as if trying to find some logical explanation that didn't end with her losing. But there wasn't one. No amount of pleading, no cleverly phrased apology, no strategic display of regret could undo what was in front of her. For the first time in our relationship, she was completely powerless. I could see her struggling to compose herself, to put on a mask of indifference, but she was unraveling fast. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin slightly, and forced out a dry laugh. One of those empty, brittle sounds people make when they're grasping at control that no longer exists. "Wow," she said, voice strained. "So, this is your idea of revenge? Sleeping with my best friend?" Olivia smirked, completely unbothered. She had always been the type to stay cool under pressure, and right now she was reveling in Lauren's discomfort. "Sweetheart," Olivia said, tilting her head slightly, her voice dripping with amusement. "You're acting like I didn't upgrade him." Lauren flinched. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. She turned back to me, desperation creeping into her expression, the sharp edge of panic creeping into her voice. "Nathan, come on," she tried again, softer this time, reaching for the version of me she thought she could manipulate. "This isn't you. We've been through so much. You don't just throw away years over one mistake." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head, almost pitying her. "You still don't get it," I murmured, stepping closer. "You didn't just cheat, Lauren. You assumed I'd forgive you. You assumed you were irreplaceable." I gestured toward Olivia, who leaned comfortably against the doorframe, arms crossed over her chest. "And now, you know the truth." Lauren's face twisted into something raw, rage, heartbreak, disbelief, all tangled together in a storm of emotions she clearly didn't know how to handle. Her gaze flickered back to Olivia, the betrayal between them cutting even deeper now. "You?" she spat, eyes burning with accusation. "How could you do this to me?" Olivia raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Oh, honey, don't act so surprised. You threw him away. I just picked him up." Lauren let out a shaky breath, her control slipping further. She was scrambling for something, anything, that could put her back in a position of power, but every second that passed made it clearer that she was grasping at nothing. "This is cruel," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're punishing me." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "No, Lauren, I'm teaching you a lesson." A silence settled between us, thick with the weight of everything left unsaid. Lauren swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if trying to stop herself from falling apart completely. "I still love you," she tried one last time, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't just stop loving someone overnight." I studied her for a long moment, then exhaled, my voice steady, final. "No, Lauren, but I did stop respecting you." Something in her broke at that. Her breath hitched, her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she truly understood. There was no coming back from this. Without another word, I turned away, walking toward Olivia, who met me with a knowing smile. Behind me, Lauren let out a strangled sound, something between a sob and a curse, but I didn't turn back. The lesson was over. She had just been dismissed, and this time I was the one who walked away. Lauren's breathing grew uneven, shallow gasps betraying her attempt to keep it together. Her fingers flexed at her sides, as if reaching for something, maybe for control, maybe for a version of reality where this wasn't happening. I watched her carefully, my face calm, unreadable, while Olivia leaned lazily against the doorway, her arms crossed, her smirk barely concealed. The contrast between them was almost poetic. Lauren unraveling at the seams, and Olivia completely composed, effortlessly victorious. "You think this makes you the bigger person?" Lauren finally hissed, her voice trembling but sharp, a wounded animal trying to bare its fangs. "You think humiliating me fixes what happened?" I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. "No," I answered simply, my voice as steady as ever. "But it ensures you'll never forget it." Lauren let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head as she paced the room in short, agitated strides. She was grasping for something, anger, righteousness, justification, anything to shield herself from the crushing realization that she had lost everything. "So this is your idea of revenge?" she spat, eyes flicking between Olivia and me. "You wanted to hurt me, so you went crawling to my best friend? Do you think that makes you a man, Nathan?" I exhaled slowly, taking my time before responding. "I didn't go crawling to anyone," I said, my voice dangerously even. "That's your mistake, Lauren. You assume I did this just to get back at you, like you were the only thing in my life that mattered, but the truth is..." I turned toward Olivia, letting my gaze linger on her with deliberate ease before finishing. "I just realized I deserved better." Lauren flinched as if I had struck her. Olivia, meanwhile, laughed softly, shaking her head. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, amusement laced through her tone. "Do you really think I'd let a man crawl to me? Please." Nathan didn't come to me for revenge. He came to me because I've always been the better choice. Lauren's nostrils flared as she turned to Olivia, her entire body tensing. "You were my friend," she said, voice raw, but her tone had shifted from anger to something closer to disbelief, betrayal sinking deeper. "You knew what I was going through, and you..." She took a shaky breath, eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "You waited for this, didn't you?" Olivia's smirk didn't falter. "I didn't wait for anything, Lauren," she replied coolly, "but I also didn't waste my time on someone who didn't appreciate what she had." She took a step forward, lowering her voice as she added, "Unlike you, I don't take good men for granted." Lauren recoiled, her composure slipping further. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. "You don't know what we had," she whispered, a desperate attempt to cling to some last piece of control. "You don't understand." I cut her off with a soft chuckle, shaking my head. "Lauren, stop," I said, almost pitying her. "This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a fight you can win with a well-placed sob story. You already played your hand, and you lost." Her lips trembled, and for a moment I thought she might cry. But instead she let out another bitter laugh, though this one was hollow, almost breathless. "Ugh, I can't believe this," she muttered, raking her fingers through her hair. "I never thought you'd be this cruel." I raised an eyebrow. "Cruel," I repeated. "Cruel is what you did when you looked me in the eyes and lied. Cruel is expecting someone to forgive a betrayal just because it's inconvenient for you to lose them. Cruel is thinking you could shatter my trust and still walk back in like nothing happened." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to something almost lethal. This is just consequences." Lauren's jaw clenched, her entire body trembling. She had no comeback, no clever remark, no final attempt to twist the situation in her favor. For the first time in her life, she had nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, and then finally she broke. Her eyes glossed over as her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shuddering breath. "So, that's it?" she whispered. "You're just done?" I exhaled, my voice soft but firm. "I was done the second you made your choice, Lauren. You just didn't realize it until now." She took a step back, her heels clicking against the floor, as if the weight of everything had just fully hit her. She glanced at Olivia one last time, her expression unreadable now. Maybe regret? Maybe resentment? Maybe just pure disbelief. And then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. But I wasn't going to let her have the last move. "Lauren!" I called. Just as she reached for the handle, she froze. Slowly, hesitantly, she turned back, hope flickering in her eyes despite everything. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I smirked. "Close the door on your way out." The last bit of color drained from her face. She hesitated only for a second before stepping through the doorway, pulling the door shut behind her with a quiet click. And just like that, she was gone. Olivia let out a slow whistle, shaking her head. "Damn," she murmured. That was satisfying. I turned to her, a small smile playing at my lips. "Yeah," I admitted. "It really was. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in ages. Peace." The silence in the room was almost deafening after the door clicked shut. Lauren was gone. For a moment I just stood there, breathing in the emptiness she had left behind. No more fake apologies, no more manipulations, no more carefully crafted words meant to convince me she still had control. It was over. And yet, I could still feel the echo of her presence, the weight of all the years we had spent together, pressing against my chest, like a phantom pain. I didn't love her anymore, I knew that. But history had a way of leaving its fingerprints on you, no matter how much you wanted to scrub them clean. "Well," Olivia said, breaking the silence, "that was fun." I turned to her, taking in the effortless confidence in her posture, the amusement flickering in her eyes. She was completely unfazed, as if she had expected this outcome from the beginning. "You enjoyed that," I noted, tilting my head. Olivia smirked. "A little," she admitted, shrugging. "She deserved it, and honestly, you deserved this moment too." I let out a breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. "Yeah," I murmured. "I think I did." We stood there for a while, neither of us rushing to fill the space with unnecessary words. I appreciated that about Olivia. She wasn't the type to push, to demand that I process things faster than I was ready to. She just existed beside me, solid and unwavering. But eventually she stepped closer, her voice softer now. "How do you feel?" I thought about that for a second. How did I feel? Relieved? Absolutely. Satisfied? Maybe a little. But there was something else too, something deeper. A strange mixture of finality and freedom that I hadn't expected. Like I just walked away from a life I should have left a long time ago, I admitted. Olivia nodded, as if she understood exactly what I meant. "Good," she said simply. "Then you did it right." I looked around the house that had once been ours, filled with memories I had spent years building, years believing in. It was strange how quickly a place could shift from feeling like a home to just being walls and furniture. Nothing about it felt warm anymore. Nothing about it felt like mine. "Are you staying here?" Olivia asked, reading my thoughts. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I was planning on leaving even before tonight. I just needed this moment first." Olivia studied me for a beat before nodding. "Then let's go." I frowned slightly. "Where?" She smiled, something knowing in her expression. "Anywhere but here." I glanced back at the space one last time, the ghost of Lauren still lingering in the air like stale perfume, and then, without hesitation, I grabbed my suitcase and followed Olivia out the door. The night air was cool against my skin as we stepped outside, the sky a deep stretch of navy dotted with faint stars. The weight of the evening, of everything that had just happened, seemed lighter now, dissolving with each step I took away from that house. Olivia walked beside me, her heels clicking against the pavement, but she wasn't in a hurry. Neither was I. "So," she said after a moment, "was this part of your plan all along?" I smirked. "What, leaving with you?" She shrugged. "Leaving her? Finally putting yourself first." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair as I considered her words. "I think I always knew it had to end," I admitted. "I just didn't realize how much I was holding on to something that was already gone." Olivia nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. "Well," she said, slipping her arm through mine, "I think this is the best decision you've made in a long time." I looked at her then, really looked at her. Olivia had always been there, in the background, in the spaces Lauren never paid attention to. She had seen me at my worst, and yet here she was, standing beside me, like she had never doubted I would come out on the other side. "You were waiting, weren't you?" I asked, watching the way her lips curled just slightly at the edges. Olivia didn't deny it. "Not waiting," she corrected, her gaze steady, just knowing. There was something in her voice, something undeniable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. Not bitterness, not anger, but something close to peace. Lauren had assumed she had more time. She had assumed she could betray me and still come back. But time had run out, and she had come home to find the truth staring her in the face. And now it was my turn to walk away. "Let's go," I said, nodding toward my car. Olivia grinned. "I thought you'd never say it." And just like that we left, disappearing into the night while Lauren was left alone, standing in the ruins of her own arrogance. She had expected forgiveness. Instead, she got replaced. Lauren sat alone in the house that used to be ours. Or maybe she was pacing, running shaky fingers through her hair, replaying the last few minutes in her mind, searching for something, anything, that would make it all make sense, that would make it not real. But it was real, and she had no one to blame but herself. Meanwhile, Olivia and I drove in comfortable silence, the city lights casting long shadows across the road. The air between us wasn't heavy, wasn't filled with tension or second-guessing. It was light, freeing, a stark contrast to what Lauren was feeling at that very moment. I didn't have to be there to know. She would be sitting in the living room, staring at the space where I had stood, where I had spoken those final words. "Close the door on your way out." Those words would replay in her head over and over, each repetition a fresh cut against her pride, against the illusion she had carefully built in her mind. Because that was the thing about Lauren. She had always believed she had control. She had convinced herself she could play the role of the regretful wife and that I, like some pathetic, love-blinded fool, would eventually take her back. She hadn't considered, not for 1 second, that I was already gone. That was her biggest mistake. "Where to?" Olivia asked, glancing at me with a small, knowing smile. I exhaled, staring at the road ahead. "Somewhere that doesn't remind me of her," I said simply. She nodded, as if she understood. Because she did. Lauren had thought she could hit reset, that she could erase what she had done with enough apologies and a few well-timed tears. But she never realized the damage wasn't something that could be undone. It wasn't a broken plate that could be glued back together. It was an explosion that had already turned everything to dust. She was still in that house, probably holding her head in her hands, whispering to herself, "What just happened? How did I lose everything in a single night?" And that was the part that made my chest tighten, not with regret, not with sympathy, but with a cold sense of satisfaction. Because it hadn't happened in a single night. She had lost me the second she betrayed me. She just hadn't realized it until now. The next morning my phone buzzed. I didn't even have to check to know who it was. "Lauren." I let it ring, then again, and again. By the fourth call, Olivia, who was sitting across from me at the hotel breakfast table, raised an eyebrow. "Persistent," she mused, sipping her coffee. I smirked, flipping my phone over so I didn't have to see her name anymore. "Desperate." Olivia leaned forward slightly, her voice light but edged with amusement. "You're not going to answer, are you?" I shook my head. No, because Lauren wasn't calling to apologize. She wasn't calling because she understood. She was calling because she was still in disbelief, because she thought there was something left to salvage. And I wasn't interested. You know, Olivia said, setting her cup down, this is the part where most guys would have caved. I gave her a questioning look. She shrugged. When the ex calls, all panicked and crying, they start to wonder if they were too harsh. They let guilt crawl in, let memories soften the blow, and suddenly, they're reconsidering things. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. But not you. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Because I don't miss her, I said honestly. I miss who I thought she was. And that person doesn't exist anymore. Olivia smiled, slow and approving. Now that is the kind of man worth my time. And with that, she picked up her coffee again, completely at ease, while Lauren, miles away, sat in her misery, realizing, too late, that her second chance had never existed in the first place. She had assumed I would forgive her. She had assumed she still had time. She had assumed she mattered. And now she had to live with the truth, that she was nothing to me now. Just another mistake I had learned from. Just another closed door, and I had moved on. For good.